Hey, this is Todd. Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with our district attorney, Robert Turner Jr., and have a lengthy conversation with him about a number of issues that are important to our area, to the Black Belt in general, the 4th Judicial District more specifically, and even more specifically, Dallas County and the Selma area. I've divided the hour and 15-minute long interview into segments so that it'll be easier to watch. This is the 4th segment of the interview with Robert Turner Jr. I hope you find it interesting and informative. And thanks for watching Selma Sun and Black Belt News Network.
Needs to be
how
shifted.
are you going to go back and shift the mindset of the people who are the criminals, who are getting guns illegally? I mean, even if they're open and carrying legally, they're not obtaining the guns legally to begin with, especially kids who are underage. How do we change that mindset? How do we make them understand that it's, because obviously they don't care if it's wrong or not. I mean, that's adult criminals or young. So how do we change? You can control, you can do permits, you can do all that. People will still get them illegally. And if you took every gun off the street, people are going to have knives and sticks. How do we change the mindset of these people and the heart of these people and make them understand that it's better to not do crime? Which is the big question, it's a huge question. Is that something that's even answerable?
Yeah, I think it is. The length of time that it would take to answer it is probably what neither of us have.
That's probably so.
But to take a stab at it, we live in one of the greatest economic systems ever created. I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism.
I do too, yeah.
But capitalism, in order to operate, you've got to have a permanent underclass, so to speak. You got to have people that's willing to work minimum wage. You got to have consumers. You know, everybody can't be a owner of a company.
Right.
You understand? Right. So with that, what I'm saying is, those with means don't oftentimes encounter the type of violent crime in their communities as those without means. So what has happened is there are certain communities where the children don't even have swing sets, baseball diamonds, basketball courts,
or 3 meals a day,
golf courses, tennis courts, or 3 meals a day. However, the way that we view things sometimes is oftentimes skewed. If they want better, they'll just do better. Why don't they move? Everybody can't move.
Right.
And I think that people who are part of the village, and especially the elected village, like the conversations that we started last week, really need to be expanded. And we need to make sure that we've got equal representation of people from all backgrounds, racial backgrounds, class backgrounds, so that we can start talking about, what are we going to do? What do you do about the parents?
Exactly.
Every kid doesn't have the same parents.
Every kid doesn't have two
You're
parents.
not going to be able to make that happen.
Right.
But in order to get back to your question, there's no money. Social workers don't get paid as much as executives and entertainers and athletes. Now our star college athletes, tomorrow, a lot of us will be cheering for our favorite teams. But now we've got college quarterbacks that make more than superintendents of education.
Right. And
What do you do with that?
That is skewed. That is wrong.
And
I can't say it's wrong.
It's not wrong.
It's
but
not
when
wrong.
people
It's
want to
the way
start asking, why would teachers want to teach when it requires the same amount
why would
of
police
education?
officers want to police?
Why would police officers want to police?
Why do you want to do what you do? You don't make as much as a football player.
And I don't make as much as I made in private practice.
Right. So why are you doing this?
Because I want to make a change and I want to make a difference. And we need a lot of people that understands that what hurts you eventually hurts me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you look at problems that are facing the Black Belt community, and you know, our circuit encompasses the entire Black Belt. You know, these are some of the poorest counties,
right,
in the state of Alabama.
mm-hmm.
One of the things that deters businesses are high crime rates and education systems that are viewed as being not up to par.
Mm-hmm.
But when not the entire village has a different approach as to how can we better educate our children. You know, we're in the Bible Belt. We're in an area right now where there's a lot of folk that don't care about public education.
Yeah, exactly. But
They're viewing, I mean, there are a lot of people who don't understand, and everybody, well, you've got vouchers, you can go wherever you want, but is that really
that base education?
But to sit around and when you start discussing blight in communities, what happens if everybody just starts abandoning all of these big public schools that have been built with taxpayers' dollars? When one alternative solution would be, why don't grown folk be grown folk? Let's have conversations and see that, look, if folks aren't educated and people aren't receiving the same amount of education and presented with the same opportunities, people are gonna eat, whether or not they have to steal to eat or whether they work for it. And we've got to make sure that we are not just taking the approach that, well, if they can't do what I did, then forget them.
No, can't
do that.
Right.
And you know, it's a paradoxical situation for some, but for me,
and you start sounding like, well, you're getting so, you know, so brain high. But the problem is, so many people have said, well, that's a question that can't be answered. It's too big to be answered.
But it can.
No, you got to answer the question, because that's what's continuing the problem, is that nobody wants to face it.
That's right. And it's the same situation. It's the same argument. It's just it involves different subjects.
But it goes back to
some people say, okay, it's not the guns that's the problem, it's the people. Right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
But at the same time, so I'll look at that and say, okay, well, when you start talking about crime rates, it's not the fact that jobs, you know, are the problem. It's like, are people adequately trained and prepared to fill the jobs that are open?
Right.
And are they adequately compensated for the hard work that they do? And so what happens is, if I'm a teacher, there are some young ladies and some young men that really all they want to be are high school football coaches. They want, their favorite role model was Mr. Jackson, who was a science teacher. They want to be a science teacher.
Right.
So they come up and they get a bachelor's degree, and they start off teaching, and they're making $40,000, $50,000 a year. And then if they get a master's, they might get bumped up to 60, and they get a doctorate, they might be bumped up to 70 or 80, which is a good livable wage. But the classrooms are overcrowded, and the staffing of these schools are controlled by the number of students in them. A survey was just released by a national watchdog foundation that said that Alabama is way behind the national average in what is allocated per pupil. So what happens is, if teachers can get paid much more in Georgia and much more in affluent school districts, like everybody, as soon as something opens up in Auburn, Opelika, Hoover, Mountain Brook, Vestavia, Huntsville, they're gone.
You can't keep the good teachers.
And it appears that for so many people,
then that goes back to, in order to pay the good teachers, you got to have higher salaries, which means you got to have more tax dollars and better tax base.
And you've got to have elected villagers,
right,
who are looking at this and seeing this as an issue.
Is exactly as an issue, and are willing to do something about it.
And are willing to do something about it.
Yeah.
So really what's happening, like I love being a country boy. I like being in
Me too, amen.
From Perry County and Dallas and Hill, going to Bibb, Perry, surrounded by all of them, Wilcox. I don't feel like I should just have to move to Tuscaloosa or Prattville or Montgomery because that's where the money is. Because what we don't realize is that it's a certain level of classism that's taking place, to where small towns are being forgotten by all parties, Democrats, Republicans.
Yeah, and once
it's
it
like,
was that was it. Yeah. Everybody, a small town was the bread and butter. Yeah, exactly. And now it's kind of like, well,
if I want to live a certain way, I got to move. There are no jobs here.
And I agree with you. I don't think that you should have to move.
And so, what happens, and what we're seeing, and this is just an opinion piece. You know, I don't know who's going to see this, but this is an opinion piece. I think that we need to have these discussions because I still believe public education should be around. I think we need it. I think, you know, for us to just take blanket approaches and say, well, every parent is responsible for just educating their own kid.
They are,
but but really,
we need to have.
So the state is just like, we're gonna leave that to them, and you can come over here and join us.
I mean, it's not realistic in this society.
It's not really, and that wasn't wasn't how it was. Like this country, when it was at its strongest, or what allowed us to be as strong as we are right now, it has always been one of the principal strengths of the country was a strong public education system. Like even there are very few families in the Black Belt. I mean, there are some, but there are very few families in the Black Belt that can say we're 4th generation private school.
Yeah, I don't even know any.
Generally, if you start talking to folk, regardless of their the color of their skin or whatever, you're gonna get a granddad or somebody that went to one of these public high schools.
And the thing is, let me ask you this: do you think that?
So for us to be elected villagers and adult villagers now and say, I don't see the importance. So you're trying to say that, you know, you're a bank president now, but you went to Selma High once yourself.
But do you think that there's too much regulation and control from high up? I mean, if we put the public system more controlled by the state or the county, do you think it would be better?
It is controlled by the state.
Yeah, but I mean, the federal, there's still a federal Department of Education that makes rules that the state has to follow. If we could get them out of it and let it be more local, do you think that would help? So that the people in the village would have more say-so over the education of their children?
I think it could and it would, but we have to know where we are. We can't lose place and space of history and what happens even in the present. We all know that the feds intervened because the states had certain belief systems that were not equally applicable to everybody. Everybody keeps wanting to ignore the fact that some things that the federal government engaged itself in, it wasn't that the feds wanted to take on more responsibility, but they got more heavily involved because they wanted to create a more perfect union. And what happens in a lot of instances where there has been federal intervention, what happens is that when those places that the feds became heavily involved in can demonstrate that there are no more vestiges that type of behavior that was going on at that point in time currently exists, then we'll step out of the way. The states have continuously failed to show that absent some federal oversight, things have completely changed.